Russia, like an old pro-thief, doesn't bother with small stuff anymore and steals big. The whole point of Moscow's existence is endless attempts to steal Kyiv. That's the obsession of every ruler of this wannabe state.
Kyiv is a Russian city.
We've heard plenty of idiotic excuses from the Kremlin about why it attacked Ukraine. Nonsense like protecting the people of Donbass, who were destroyed along with their cities. And just as ridiculous, the claim of preventing NATO expansion. Greetings from Sweden and Finland.
Who's Finnish? MME.
But the truly craziest and most important reason for attacking Ukraine is supposedly that Kyiv is a very Russian city, and the occupiers came to reclaim their own so-called ancient ancestral lands.
Kyiv is a Russian city, and from there comes a threat to the existence of the Russian Federation.
In reality, Russians have no ancestral lands at all. They are outsiders everywhere. No one knows where the cradle of the Russian people is. Is it in Mordovia, Bashkortostan, Tatarstan, the Caucasus, or Karelia? Maybe in Tuva?
No.
The Russians deprive themselves of their own origins because for some reason they don't want to admit that they are Ubric Finns. It's truly no wonder that Shorban is so deeply drawn to them. Despite all their profound hatred for Europe, Russians have always dreamed of becoming an integral part of Europe. That's why claiming Kyiv is about proving their Europeanness, their belonging to the civilized world. If Kyiv is the mother of Russian cities, then the children deserve a visa to Kosovo.
Valerie, do you support the war? Or are you afraid? You're just saying this is a conflict between peoples. If someone were to attack your very own home, your personal sanctuary.
Wait, turn it off. Just turn it off. I want to talk.
It's fine.
Even Russians themselves are convinced that without Kyiv, Russia is a barbaric state, without history or any reason to exist. Let's try to make sense of a schizophrenic's logic.
I'm truly convinced that we're going to take Kyiv, not liberate it. We're liberating Donbass, but everything else we're going to take. Just like we took Vienna, like we took Berlin, like we took Budapest.
How can a people or state that appeared much later than Kyiv call it historically theirs? By that logic, Germans could call Rome originally German just because it was once under the rule of a German emperor. Or the Egyptian pyramids are originally English just because the British occupied Egypt at the beginning of the 20th century. Boris Johnson is actually a pharaoh. Of course, that's nonsense.
It's nonsense, isn't it? Total nonsense.
Kyiv is, historically, geographically, and genetically, a Ukrainian city. Kyiv is Ukraine itself. Modern Ukrainians have still preserved the cultural traditions of the ancient Kyivan people. And the ancient people of Kyiv spoke a language very close to Ukrainian. We could easily sit down with Sviatoslav over a cup of mead right now and discuss the expansion of Khazaria to the east. A Russian wouldn't understand a thing. Kyiv appeared long before the world even knew about the existence of Russia, Moscow, the Russian world, Mikhail Krug songs, or naked parties. According to official records, Kyiv was founded in the 5th century, but that's a very rough estimate. The date from Wikipedia was set by Soviet officials so they could grandly celebrate 1,500 years of the mother of Russian cities. Back then, Soviet propaganda was actively falsifying history and pushing the fairy tale that Ukraine and Russia are the same thing. This was just a continuation of the old imperial brainwashing of the masses.
Let's be completely honest with each other, my friends. The simple truth is, we are all Russians, because historically we all came from Kyivan Rus.
In reality, no one knows exactly when Kyiv was founded. But there's a strong belief that Soviet scholars stole at least 500 years from its history.
Thieves steal anything they think is just lying around. They don't shy away from anything, whether it's expensive perfume or just an ordinary roll of toilet paper.
The ancient Greek scholar Ptolemy, as early as the 2nd century, marked on his map Sarmatia, that is, the territory of modern Ukraine, a city located in the middle reaches of the Burstinies, meaning the Dnipro River, roughly where Kyiv is geographically situated today. Ptolemy called it Azagorium. The eminent historian of Kyiv, Mykola Zakrevsky, asserted that Azagorium is undoubtedly the future capital of Ukraine. Later, the architect Boris Yarofalov, after analyzing the structure of the city, concluded that Kyiv has the features of a classic Roman military camp, which was located in the Podol district.
You will remove your helmet and state your name.
Yes, I am a cosmonaut. Absolutely real.
It's a well-known fact that many Roman camps eventually grew into cities: Vienna, Budapest, London, Bonn. It can be said with confidence that as soon as trade appeared in this region of the world, Kyiv emerged as well, because it has an incredibly advantageous location for ancient logistics. And what were the Russians doing at that time? Exactly nothing. Because it's hard to do anything when you don't exist.
He just simply vanished.
From the 9th century, Kyiv becomes the capital of a vast state, from the Baltic to the Black Sea. And it remains the capital until the middle of the 13th century, 400 years, until the Mongol invasion. And it's this period that Russian historical marauders have latched onto. The entire far-fetched Moscow theory is based on the idea that after Kyiv was destroyed by the Mongols, all the people of Kyiv supposedly gathered together and moved to live in Muscovy. So, according to that, Russians are actually people from Kyiv, and Muscovy is Rus.
What you just said is one of the most insane and idiotic things I've ever heard.
But this particular theory has two little snags that could truly twist the mind of anyone who thinks even a little bit. The Mongols came from the east, burning everything in their path. So how did the people of Kyiv, after seeing these fierce and brutal invaders destroy their city, decide to flee in the very direction those invaders had come from? To a place where everything has already been burned. Where's the logic in that?
It drowned.
It would have been more convenient and safer to run west, especially considering that Kyiv was part of the Galicia-Volhynia Principality, which also suffered much less from the invasion. It really feels like Russian historians are slyly deceiving us. The second snag will melt the cotton-brained mind even more. In the chronicles, princes living in the territory of modern Russia, for example, those of Vladimir Suzdal, did not consider themselves Rus and did not associate themselves with Kyiv. When they were heading to visit the Dnieper Hills, in the written documents that have come down to us, they wrote, "I'm going to the Rus land, to Kyiv." That's a bit odd. When we go from Zaporizhia to Vinnytsia, we don't say we're going to Ukraine, to Vinnytsia. Only foreigners or Godzilla scriptwriters talk like that. On road signs showing the distance to towns, they also write the country where they're located, so there's no confusion. But even if we ignore common sense and pretend to believe Moscow's falsifications, it would actually be even worse for the Kremlin. Based on their own arguments and claims, Moscow is originally a Ukrainian city, just like the entire Golden Ring, because for 400 years they were under the rule of a state with its capital in Kyiv. Moreover, Russians love to shout that Odessa is a Russian city because it was founded during the reign of a Russian empress. Okay, Moscow was founded by a Kyiv prince, just like Vladimir and Yaroslavl, as well as Ryazan, Tver, and Tula. All of these were under Kyiv's rule. Again, by Kremlin logic, if some lands were once part of the Moscow state, they are originally Russian. So it turns out that the Moscow Principality, which was part of the Kyiv state, is originally Ukrainian.
God forbid, may Almighty Allah never drive Ukrainians out or take anything away from them. Ukrainians always come back. Ukrainians will return and reclaim what is theirs. But when Ukrainians come back, they don't know how to measure their strength and use it proportionally.
This game can be played by two, and Russia has zero chance of winning. And Ukrainians, in the championship for these territories, at the very least make it to the semifinals with the Sarmatians. And Russians weren't even allowed to compete in these games.
Get out of here, freaks.
This whole global historical scam is actually very easy to explain. The backward, provincial, pseudo-empire of Moscow needed to belong to something prestigious and universally recognized. In Europe at that time, the lineage of rulers and states was extremely important. It's one thing if you're just some Ivan from the swamp, and quite another if you are a descendant of the Kievan princes, a legitimate and respected dynasty. That means, at least formally, you're not a barbarian anymore, and people can actually talk to you. Later, driven by an inferiority complex, the Russians would go even further and declare themselves descendants of Byzantium, even calling Istanbul an originally Russian city.
So why wait? Destroying Istanbul is actually very easy. All it takes is dropping a single nuclear bomb into the strait.
Looking at how Russians cling to other people's history, other people's lands, and other people's achievements, you can conclude that they despise and are ashamed of their own. In reality, Russians don't want to be Russian. They dream of becoming someone else. In fact, for centuries, Russians have been trying to become Ukrainians, but they just can't manage it.
My soul is already unbearably wounded by everything. By the losses, by the human casualties, by the senselessness of this war. After these 2.5 years, there is no ideology left at all. None at all. This time, I visited several units while I had the chance. No ideology whatsoever. No one has any.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.